path as an artist is individual. There is no direct road that is going to lead you, so every artist is on their own journey. And that's something that I have learned and struggled with over the years to make sure that I'm on my path. And something as an educator for me too is to tell the next generation of artists that they have opportunities, they have choices, but it's not a clear path. So within that being said, I've done multiple things to support my art career and to kind of keep that pushing forward. But it's also, again, something that I constantly need to be reminding myself that I need to be in the studio and making and not getting lost to make sure that I stay on my own path. Through my journey as an artist, I really have researched and studied the way that fashion has defined culture and how it has defined roles for women in society. The corset is one that I have been researching for the last 20 years, and I keep getting more and more information from. With this piece, I really wanted to push my work further, scale-wise, but also my research within the garment. So what happens if the garment becomes more a space? And what happens if I create something that refers to garment, but also crosses those lines into sculpture, and can also talk about femininity and ideals of women in beauty. So within this piece, again, it's an accumulation of a lot of research, a lot of making over the years, and has really kind of been pushed forward with size, scale, and some other ideas that I've had but haven't been able to explore yet. One being that these two shapes are really based off of vessels and also fallopian tubes. So within this piece, I really wanted to kind of start to bring in the conversation about women's reproductive rights. This morning I was thinking about it. So May 3rd was my birthday. I turned 45, and I woke up to the headlines. And I'm getting emotional just talking about it because I've been working on this piece for the last year. And for this to really be coming up, and that's something within my research, fashion is history. Fashion tells time, and it's also circular, right? It's constantly repeating. Why are we repeating this again too? Why are we questioning, the rights and the choices that women have over their own body? So it makes me very sad that things do keep repeating. We're not learning from the past. At the same time, we need to be talking about it to make changes and make sure that things don't go back to where we were. Within the corset, in the early 1900s, the women's dress reform movement was happening. At the same time, that was freeing women from the corset. So once they were able to be free from the corset, their roles in society changed because of movement and being able to not be so constricted. And it also goes along with the first feminist movement too that were all kind of happening. And those are things I'm really interested in, is like, how can a garment control a woman to the point where it controls the roles and what women do in society too. Women's fashion defines culture. It defines history, and it pushes us forward into the future. So watching that really gives me information and going back into my studio, studying these garments and seeing what is the next trend, which is usually reference to the past in some way, shape, or form. The other thing that it influences is just, I'm going to use an example, the Met Gala that just happened with Kim Kardashian, who wore Marilyn Monroe's dress. So here we have two icons of the ideal of what beauty is supposed to be. Within Kim Kardashian's dress, she also lost 16 pounds in 1 month to fit into it. And I think that's really interesting and really sad all at the same time, that women are okay with saying that they're sacrificing their body to fit into a garment. And those things inspire me, especially within this piece of it being physically tight around this understructure, to show those restrictions and constrictions that are put on women through fashion. The corset has been in fashion for 400 years, and it comes in and out. Men also wore it, so it just wasn't restricted to women. The corset also was something which is called tight lacing put on the body. So they were literally forcing the body to redefine its shape. And it usually took 2 people, if not 3, depending on how tight you needed to get it. And they're literally pulling it around the body to constrict it, to get it to that ideal shape. And it was usually the waist that was the measurement that they were trying to get down to. You can look it up and you can see images of women's ribs being pushed up, organs being misplaced, all to get what the ideal was, which was, in the Victorian era, it was 18-inch size waist. Again, I'm questioning this and looking back at it historically, but also seeing these things still happening contemporarily with fashion. And within this piece, it was really important to kind of see that constriction. We're literally taking an understructure, which is also a garment referenced of the undergarment, and then putting a skin or a corset over it and tight lacing it together. It was very important for me, with everything that was made within this, refer back to garment construction and design. The grommets are what would actually be used on a corset. That is the size. I really thought it would have been probably a lot easier to use grommets that would be more for, let's just say, upholstery and a larger size, but that doesn't go back to the body. So within all my work, I'm constantly even scaling up or making a garment is thinking about garment construction and design. So the grommets are what would be used. The lacing is ordered from a corsetry place that I get all my supplies from, and it's actually lacing for corsets. The material that's on the outer skin is called muslin, and muslin is what is used to mock up a toilette. So it's kind of the first stages of garment design before you go into your fashion fabrics. And that allows you to kind of explore your design, work it out before going into a more expensive fabric. The other thing that's happening within the materials on this piece is the interior is lined with batting. Batting is usually in between a quilt. And you usually never see it because a quilt is defined by 3 layers. You have your top layer, your batting, and then your backing fabric. It was important for me to kind of expose that interior. I wanted to kind of show that warmth and comfort that a quilt would actually give you, or kind of have that memory of, and kind of expose it in the interior of this piece. So we have an interior and an exterior that's happening, and that was very thoughtfully thought out throughout this process. Labor is also something that is very important for me to be working in within this piece. Labor, of course, going back to women's work and women's labor, and also feminine techniques. So sewing and garment construction usually goes to the feminine too. So even with the grommet tape, I could have bought it, but instead I made all the bias tape. I interfaced it, and we made all the grommets. So each line of these grommets was about 4 hours worth of labor and work. That's one part. The other is all the patterning that happened. Each of these pattern pieces, and there's 16 of them, are all separate patterns. Within that, we had to make the pattern, we cut, laid it out, and then we top stitched, which you can see there's still sewing that's on top of it too, which was also multiple hours on top of it. So the labor aspect, as much as I feel like there could have been ways I could have got around it or outsourced, it was really important that the hand was in there, and that the making part and labor to start to kind of come through. And I think that's also with scale and kind of sizing up that I'm hoping that that conversation will come up within this piece. Again, wanting to go larger in scale, I really wanted the viewer to see the interior and the exterior and to really interface with the piece. Because there's not just one sculpture, there's two sculptures. And the idea was too that these two pieces were starting to come together, but they're not there yet. And again, conceptually, that's really important of kind of the ideas that I'm talking about within this piece too, is that we're still really far apart from talking about these issues that still lie, and also not meeting together. So I was hoping that the viewer would come in and be able to stand in between, look to one sculpture, look to the other, kind of use their imagination about how they would come together or how they could possibly put them together too. And that was really important, because as much as I'm interested in garment, I'm also interested in site and architecture. The garment it's a house for the body. The body is just an armature that holds it up, as a building is, right? A building houses a body too. So playing with scale and really letting the viewer kind of interface with that and hopefully be thinking about those things is really important, I think, within this piece. White, again, goes back to purity. It goes back to the wedding dress and the woman being pure and being pushed forward within this image. It also goes back to some historical things within garments of and class. So we have the white collar and blue collar. White collar was there because that meant that you could afford to launder your clothes. So there's different class issues there too, of the color and what that means. The ideal of beauty, too, of this pureness, for me, it's also this kind of blank slate of white, bringing in color. So if this was red or black, it would have a whole different other meaning. And for me, I'm not saying that future-wise I might use color, but for where I've been over the last couple of years, the white has allowed me to just kind of push concept and kind of not bring in that conversation just yet, even though I think that white adds a lot to it. I'm really excited. I'm also very emotional about this piece too. It's been a year and a half in the making. I haven't made work like this before. Usually I'm literally weaving and making sculptures instead of sewing, patterning, and doing all these different elements. And I think within this, I'm excited about the way of patterns coming together just with the tight lacing, and kind of could see it kind of growing and changing into other shapes. And then kind of, again, I'm hoping to kind of push forward a conversation of these ideas that I'm thinking about women's labor, women's rights, and how we can start kind of really talking about that through something that we all interface with every day, which is a garment. I'm really hoping that they have an experience. So I hope that they come in and they question the labor and they see how was it put together. I hope they see the tension, the constriction that's happening. I hope they see the questions of femininity that I'm asking within this piece too. I hope it's just not a corset that they're seeing, but it's also referencing it in some of these things that I'm talking about, of how this one garment has so much historical and political meaning, is something that they'll kind of walk away with and think about a little bit more. I'm also hoping that the space in between, right? The space in between means a lot. The space in between the garment and the body, the space in between the building and themselves too. So I'm hoping that they'll start to feel that. A woman's body is constantly a site of constriction and restriction. And the corset does that. It is physically restricting the female body. Women's rights are also constricted by state. Within this piece, I'm really hoping that the viewer will see that, feel it, question it, and make changes.